All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Center for Global Engagement's Engage Your World Speaker Series. Scholars and practitioners in this series help us better understand the intersection between local and global issues more effectively. My name is Tavi Kohli. I'm a faculty member at the Center for Global Engagement, and I'm stepping in today for our city's coordinator, Michelle Dawson, who is unfortunately unwell. So for those who are new to Engage Your World, welcome. To those who have supported us and participated in the series over the years, thank you so much for your continued support. As I said before, Engage Your World has a very simple goal. I have been notified that my volume is not working very well, so let's see if I can fix it. Can you guys hear me now? All right, perfect. Let's try this again. As I said, my name is Tanu Kohli, and I'm a faculty member at the Center for Global Engagement. And I just want to welcome everyone here. As I said before, Engage Your World has a very simple goal. It is to bring scholars and practitioners of matters of global importance to FSU. And the idea is to learn more about the world around us, recognize these opportunities from each other. And this year, for our Engage Your World theme, we are focusing on education and gender equity. So keeping along with that theme, I'm gonna quickly introduce our speaker. Before I do that, however, I want to let you know about some groups of engagement. You can direct your questions to either me or our co-host Angelique Stevens at any time during the talk using the chat feature. The Q&A will be reserved for after the talk, so please remember that as well. But feel free to post your questions anytime during the talk to either Angelique or me. Please also remember that any disruption in the form of inappropriate language or images are strictly prohibited and will not be tolerated. We will kick you out. I will also post these in the chat window for all of you to see, so we're all on the same page. So after those rules of engagement, our final speaker for the fall 2021 semester for Engage Your World is Dr. Sohaila Isaqzai. Dr. Isaqzai earned her Ph.D. in international and multicultural education. And her master's is in sociocultural and international development education from FSU. Her main area of research is girls' education in Afghanistan. This interest is rooted in her personal life as an Afghani woman who found her voice through education and in her professional life as an educationalist and women rights activist. She's specifically interested in more sustainable and locally driven positive changes in girls' education in Afghanistan. Since 2004, Dr. Isaqzai has worked in different roles focusing on education, girls' and women's rights with various non-government organizations and Afghani governmental entities. Her most recent professional experience includes working as a consultant with the former Afghani Ministry of Education and the World Bank. She worked on many research and education projects for these entities. Unable to go back to her country, unfortunately, Dr. Isaqzai has moved to Canada since her graduation. She believes that the power of Afghani women is an important factor in fighting against gender inequality brought by the current Taliban regime. So without further ado, I would like to turn over the spotlight to Dr. Isaqzai.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the introduction, and I would like to say hello to everybody who came here tonight. I'm really excited to see so many people and some of really like some familiar names. I think before anything, like wasting any time, I'm going to just start my presentation. So Do you see it as like a, I'm so sorry. Sorry. My son just decided. So do you see it as a screen? Yeah,
Yes,
yeah, no, I think it's fine. Yeah, I'm sorry. My son decided to come inside. So today I'll be talking about an experience about leveraging tradition and religion to increase gender equity. And this is specifically about school in a relatively conservative Afghan community and how like girls' education was improved in that society, in that community. So even though like this like I'm going to share like to play this YouTube video, this is not really directly related to my topic, but I wanted to share this because I think this sets a ground for my topic, and this has a like a strong indirect relation to my topic. So I'm going to play. I hope it just you hear the sound. If you don't hear the sound, I think it has some like subtitles. You could just like mute your computers and read the subtitles, and let me know if there is any problem.
A few weeks ago, Afghans.
Okay, I need to add this one, that this is an Al Jazeera report, and they put that like few days after the Taliban took over Afghanistan. And I also would like to say that Al Jazeera is like a kind of like one of the media that is very sympathetic with the Taliban. And this video is meant to show the normal life under the Taliban.
Had to go through rigorous security to play football in the park next to the governor's house in Jalalabad. Since the governor handed over control of the city to the Taliban, they don't need permission. They say they continue to play in their kits without any problem. Less than half an hour ago at the same venue, Taliban leaders from Nangarhar province were addressing people. Most of those in the stadium gathered to show their support for the Taliban.
We're very excited. After 20 years, the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan is back, as the former government was illegitimate. Now everyone is very happy, and we have a peaceful Afghanistan. No one is stopping us from saying anything on social media.
Jalalabad is the provincial capital, and it's on a crucial eastern trade route with Pakistan. Taliban leaders are content with their 2-week progress, and the focus remains on security and rooting out corruption.
There's peace now in Nangarhar province. Everyone feels secure, which has encouraged them to continue with their business. Earlier, that wasn't possible, and people used to close their shops before sunset as they were afraid of being robbed and killed. But now, shops are open till midnight, and people are happy.
There was no violence when the Taliban took over, but business is slower than before. Banks are closed, and many people are concerned about the future. They remember the Taliban from 20 years ago, and there are also traders who are concerned about the dwindling business prospects in the last 2 weeks, despite this being a period of security. A few weeks ago, Afghans had to go.
Yeah. So I would like to ask everybody to kind of like quickly for like 30 seconds or 1 minute, write in the chat to everyone that what was wrong with this one? What was wrong in this video? Something was weird about it.
Can I answer that question even though I'm a moderator?
Sure, yeah.
I mean, I immediately noticed an absence of women. I don't know if others noticed that.
Yes, this was my reaction when I saw this video actually, that even though like Al Jazeera wanted to show that yeah, life is going normal under the Taliban, and even though I'm not sure like people who were interviewing whether they really believe the Taliban are good or whether they were just saying approving of them because of the fear, like all those things apart, like with all those efforts still, like there was no woman, there were like no girls or no woman in this like normal life.
So
And
well,
yeah.
Holly is also observing that Mohammed noticed the absence of women too, but Holly is writing in the chat window that they showed only positive opinions and that it was
Yes.
pure propaganda.
Yes, that's true. And like I was saying that like even though if we believe that all those people who were saying those things, even if we believe, okay, like they were not saying that out of fear, they were saying that because this was true. Like, yes, like everybody is good, but still, like the lack or absence of women was like a very like striking fact in this report. And I would say that this is like it wasn't like this. Like there has been always problems in Afghanistan about gender issues, but like when at the end of August, this was the situation. I could say on August 13th or August 12th of the same month, the situation or that neighborhood or that area wouldn't look like this. So this kind of takes us back to my topic, which is girls' education. And I would like to say a little bit of background about this. Like girls' education and gender issues has been always problematic throughout the history in Afghanistan. Girls' education started by the formal girls' education started sometimes by early 20th century. And that start was like a very revolutionary start. We had a young king and a young queen who traveled to Europe, traveled to Turkey, and they had like this impressionist view about the progress in those countries. So they quickly wanted to kind of convert Afghanistan in a similar context. So this is when they established formal schools for boys and girls, and they hired many teachers from Germany, England, Britain, I would say, and also France to teach students. And the fact that their reforms was revolutionary and their reforms was impressionist. So that became, and also there was, of course, like many propaganda from religious leaders and from British of the time that were kind of like scared of losing their colonies in the region. They kind of like all these things got together and caused the king to be dethroned, all schools to be closed. So after that king, for a while, there was no formal schooling for girls, like it was banned. But then during 1940s up until 1970s, late 1970s, there was a more like a gradual and evolutionary approach towards girls' education. This was the time that we had Dehati schools or village schools, which was like in every village that there was no school, there was no access. Government would have like a classroom that would teach girls and boys up to at least like third grade. And this time the curriculum and like the style of the schooling was more designed around the Afghan culture. And it was kind of like more considering the norms and the religion and the reality of the country. But then, of course, during the communist regime, the curriculum like lost their unbiased. I mean, of course, like every curriculum is kind of biased, but then this was like more obvious because curriculum and schooling was obviously like promoting the Marxist and anti-religious agenda. And then we had during the war area, during the Mujahideen did not like practically banned education, but they literally banned education, but they practically made it so difficult for girls to go to school because it was so insecure and there was like no, like, and also the government systems was collapsed. And then we had the Taliban era, the first, now I call it the first Taliban era, that girls' education was totally banned. But then we had a rise in 2002 with the new, now former government that we like girls were able to go back to school. The Ministry of Education in Afghanistan started with 1 million boys enrolled in school, and then that went to 9 million in 2020. And then 39% of these were girls. So this was the highest rate of girls that we had in school compared to any time in the history of Afghanistan. But still, by that time, there was like 3.5 million children out of school, and then around 3 million of them were girls. So during the time that I was doing my research, the main barriers to education in general and then to girls' education in specific was insecurity or instability, was poverty and child labor, lack of infrastructure, gender discriminatory norms, lack of qualified female teachers, administrative barriers, corruption, and failure to institutionalize community engagement. And of course, my interest was community engagement because research showed that community engagement can control or can mitigate some of these barriers. And all those barriers that I made them kind of bold in this box are barriers that research showed community engagement or communities are able to tackle to some point or solve to some point. And then even though my research was done before the return of the Taliban, but I would like to kind of give an update of how girls' education is right now. Right now, in all provinces, girls up to grade 6 are allowed to go to school. But beyond that grade, only 10 or to 12 provinces allow girls to go to school. So in most provinces, girls are like beyond grade 6, they are not allowed to go to school. And only today, actually, one more province started allowing girls to go to school. But then also there were reports that now, like many girls drop out of school or they are not going because of so many other problems, like they are scared or like because of the poverty that is increasing in the region. So this brief is a little bit about how it is right now. So the government, or I would say the former government and their partners, specifically World Bank and UNICEF, they came up with many solutions to solve this girls' education. And one of them was establishing school management shura, which literally means school management councils. School management shura refers to councils made of volunteer people. And then their structure is that there is school principal, usually is the leader of the shura, and then there are religious clergy, parents, community elders, community volunteers, teachers, and students who are members of these councils. And then this school management shura is kind of like, I call it a semi-imported institution in Afghanistan, because in Afghanistan, there is like a long history of having local councils deciding for communities that are deciding for the country. And that those shuras are called jirga, which literally means council, is a Pashto word for council. So that tradition was in the country. But then World Bank and UNICEF, based on the lesson learned in other countries, they started establishing school management shura and kind of motivating and funding Ministry of Education in Afghanistan to support the idea. But then there is like a specific difference between school management council and jirgas, because jirgas are totally tradition and they are elected members. But then SMS are volunteer people, and it's like a more formal institution. They have a specific term to serve, and also they have a specific like TWAR. But jirgas are not like that, and jirgas are usually constructed to like solve a specific problem, and then they will dissolve usually. And then the main task of the SMS was to mobilize communities in supporting education and schools, and to increase the ownership, or at least the feeling of ownership of local people towards education. This was like, okay, if local people feel that they have a say in the education of their children or the education of the children of their communities, that's going to help. So this was the broader idea. I was interested in this SMS, and I wanted to study SMS, specifically that there was so much claim that SMS could be so effective, but then there was a problem. In Afghanistan, like over 90% of SMSs were inactive. Like they existed on the paper, but they really did not do any work. And Ministry of Education really did not support in practice. So there were like more than 16,000 SMSs serving all public schools in the country, because each public school had one SMS. But then you barely could see an active one. So I decided, okay, I'm going to find one active and one, let's say, successful SMS, and study and see what they did that they became active or successful. So by the help of the Ministry of Education, I found this SMS in a, it's near Kabul, but it wasn't inside Kabul. It was like an area towards the east of Kabul. And then this area was like a conservative community. And actually, I when I was interviewing people, and when I would ask them, okay, how do you describe your community? So this conservative was something that they, like, usually they would say that, yeah, our community is a conservative community. So the school characteristics that I studied was that this school in 2004, it was an only girl school. It was started from primary and would go up to 12th grade. And in 2004, it started with 800 students. And in 2012 and 13, it reached to 5,000 students. And since then, it kind of like kept that momentum. They never really like, they kept their enrollment and retention rate. And the school had really highly educated teachers as well. And the community characteristic, as I say, like it was a conservative community, but then it was like ethnically, it was a diverse community, and also the social economic status of residents was really like diverse. They were like, you had middle class, you had different refugees that returned from Iran and Pakistan, and also you had so many internally displaced population or persons who were living there. And the characteristics of the SMS that I studied, it was a group of 15 people. And then it was kind of like almost equally men and women. And then all members, they were influential in their communities. Like they only were not the SMS members. They were like, they had also like other influences of other activities in the communities. Almost all members were really pro-education. They were pro-girls' education, and most members were wealthy comparing to other people in the community. And as I said, like they were like ethnically, they were diverse. Like some of them like Pashto speakers, some of them were like Dari speaker. And when I was speaking with them, like even like the Dari language, one would speak with like a different dialect with different accent, another one would speak with another accent, same with Pashto. So it was kind of like really diverse ethnical and social background. So my findings for that study and my focus was that I looked, okay, what is to show me that they really promoted girls' education? And then I tried to understand that what factors were related and what factors enabled them to improve girls' education. And then of course, like the ongoing challenges. And the topic that I want to specifically talk today about, how they leverage tradition and culture, is more related to like my like two second finding, that how they were able to solve challenges and how they were able to improve girls' education. They were doing so many things, but then did many of the things that they were doing. I'm sorry, again, we have a guest. Okay, sorry. And it was that they did many of the activities through leveraging tradition and religion. They knew how this culture is and how it works. They knew the impact of the religion on and the strength of the religion or the influence of the religion in the community. So they would go through that channel. How they did it, I kind of divided this, like decided tonight to talk about the 3 activities that they were doing. They were doing a lot actually, but tonight I would like to talk about these 3 activities. That they would advocate for girls' education, and they would solve problems through like, okay, they knew that this culture is like respects leaders. elders of the community have a strong say, they would go to that channel. They also like use masjid for advocacy. They also, when they solve many of the problems like through informal channels. They did fundraising through these, like going through the channels of religion and culture, and also the way that they discussed about their motivation or the legitimacy of the existence of their SMS. Also, that was like, they would even define that through the cultural channel. And I'm going to like kind of like to directly like kind of to show how they did it. I decided to kind of put their own quotes and their own stories, what they told me. So they would advocate for girls' education through relying on elders and leaders. They like their SMS members was like the SMS members are like should SMS member should volunteer to become members. But then the leader of this SMS know that, okay, we really cannot let anyone volunteer, because anyone who volunteer and become SMS may not have the resources to be able to serve the school. So they kind of like made a list of who is pro-education, who has resources, and who can be a good member, and who has a strong say, I would say like elders and leaders. Then they approached those people and asked them if they could be, like if they could volunteer to be a part of these shura. So this is a direct quote that says, whenever we need to pick a shura member, we all sit together and see who in the community or school is pro-education and influential in the community. Wealthier people are also preferred. They have more resources. Members also need to be active and committed. Then we invite them to our shura. And then the other quote is from the school principal, that he's saying that how having these elders and leaders is specifically helpful in the Afghan culture. They say if the school principal tries to reach out to people, people will not listen to them. They think the principal is talking for her school's benefit. However, when the imam, the block's representative, or other community leaders talk about the importance of girls' education, people pay attention. They think that these are our leaders and they talk for our good. This gets especially impactful when people say that imam, the block representative, other leaders, and elders of the community deliver the same message. They give even more importance to the message and are more likely to follow it. So this is how they use this influence of the community leaders, which is like a very cultural thing, for the benefit of the SMS. And then the other one is that they use masjid as a source of advocacy for girls' education. And I was really fascinated by seeing this, because usually in Afghanistan and like in similar countries and contexts, religion and culture and tradition is kind of pitted against girls' education, against gender equity. So many activists kind of their approach to increase gender equity or to increase to help promote girls' education. Many activists approach it as kind of like opposing culture and religion. But then this SMS, the way that they did, they kind of like used all those resources. They used the strength of masjid for their benefit. This is kind of like, as I said, is against the understanding that understand Islam, specifically Islam and Afghan culture, as kind of like opposing girls' education and gender equity. So this is what Imam told me. I understand life is different from place to place. This is how life is here. We live in a jihadi community. And by jihadi community, he meant like a conservative community. I try to encourage people while respecting and understanding their lifestyle. When I tell those people about the importance of education for both boys and girls, and I narrate them several hadiths of the Prophet about the importance of educating a daughter, people reflect on these hadiths. It always has an impact on them. And then one of the teachers told me that they use even like masjid or Friday prayers as an advocacy to kind of like ask parents to prevent absentees of their children. So she told me sometimes, especially before and after Eid and holidays, many students are absent from school. We know that most often it is the parents, especially mothers, who tell their daughters not to go to school and stay at home to help prepare for a holiday or clean up after it. They tell them a day or two is not a big deal, but it's a few years that we make sure before and during holidays, Imam talks about this in masjid and persuade parents to prevent and discourage children unexcused school absentees. So that I found this and many other examples like really fascinating, that how they use this masjid as a channel to kind of promote girls' education in their community, or kind of like promote the status of their school. And then other way that they use this, like kind of, I would say, leverage the Afghan tradition, was how they solved problems. One was addressing dropouts. Whenever there was a dropout, many of my participants told me that they would just like try to kind of informally go approach parents, informally solve the problem. Sometimes they would, okay, like if a parent says that I don't have money to send my daughter to school to buy like uniform or like stationery, they like so informally they would try to raise funds, like informally solve these problems. So this is one example that a teacher told me, that female members, whenever there is a dropout, female members go to their houses and visit mothers, and male members meet with fathers. So they know this like very sensitive aspect of the culture. We have had a lot of these cases that we visit families for dropouts, and we manage to convince most of them. And the other problem that they solve is addressing harassment. Many research indicates that harassment, girls harassment on the street, is a very like impactful issue that prevents many girls from schooling. So my participants, many of them discuss this one, and they say that whenever a girl is harassed, like they could not go through like formal channels to ask the police and involve the police, because they said first girls are not like really do not feel comfortable to go and give a testimony to the police. And most of the time, police really cannot do anything with, they're so corrupted and they do not do anything about this. And then they also, one participant told me that they're so concerned that whenever a girl or a group of girls are harassed, they solve it really silently and very quietly, because they were scared that, okay, because they were saying that if as a Shura member, I solve the issue, I mean, I can put my logic and solve it. But if a father or a brother of that girl sees, okay, like that my daughter or my sister is harassed, or this girl goes and tells them, a fight could happen. And he said that even like they could kill each other, because this is a very sensitive topic. The system that they created over this sensitive topic was that whenever a girl was harassed, they could just quietly go and tell female Shura member who were at school, tell them that, yeah, like on the street, we saw girls are like walking, they like boys are walking, they like harass us, they tell us like things, like they would report an incident. Then these female member of Shura would inform the male members of Shura. And then members of Shura would use their like informal channels to solve the issue. One example is that if a girl is harassed, they or Shura members immediately go and find the boys that did it. They talk to them and warn them, like they really threaten them. And then they talk to their families to control their boys, and they use this like this shaming aspect of it, that how shameful it is for your boys to harass girls in this community. Also, Imam or Masjid's Imam will remind people in the masjid to take care of their sons and prevent them from harassing girls. So this was an issue that they were saying that for a long time, after each harassment is like a case of harassment is solved, for a long time they did not see any other incident before being reported. So this was a way that they really like kept a safe, like maintained a safe neighborhood around their school. And then other aspect was this fundraising. They knew how, like what are the sensitive, again, like what are the cultural and sensitive topics in the community. Like I, as a researcher, read research and saw that, okay, on the research, it's written that not having a boundary wall for schools, for girls' school, like is not a really positive thing in Afghanistan, because parents really do not feel safe sending their daughters to a school without boundary walls. I mean, as an Afghan, of course, I know that. But then these Shura members, they all knew it culturally without reading any research or without seeing any statistics. So this was how they kind of like try to raise funds. So this Shura member was talking about an event that they invited many wealthy people in their communities and kind of ask them, okay, if you could help the school. And then this is one example that we also try to find private donors and sponsor for the school. For example, we took an event and invited all the influential and rich residents of the area. We shared all the school problems with them and asked them to donate. And after this guy was talking about how they were feeling that, okay, like it's a girls' school, it's in the community, in your community, kind of like as members of this community, it's good for you, it's an honor for you to have the school. And then he said, I will remember that in that meeting, a businessman said that he would donate $20,000 US. We told him to use that to build boundary walls around the school. He did it. In fact, he ended up spending $26,000 to finish the wall. He did it because we and him knew that parents do not allow their daughters to study on the roads. So by roads, he meant like, as if a school doesn't have boundary wall, people, like cars that is going on the road, they could see these girls. So the girls needed a safer place or safer space. And then also they used masjid for fundraising. This was one example that they told me, one of the Shura leaders actually. This year, the principal said that we need to replace many broken windows. The Masjid Imam at the prayer time told people that the winter is coming and it will be cool for girls to sit in class with broken windows. Then people donated money and we replaced windows. So, and then this last one, that how they explain their motivation for serving a girls' school and how they legitimize their mission was that they defined girls' education as a good or as a tool for the collective society. And this kind of came against my theoretical framework and everything that I built up at the beginning, because for those of you who know, I use the human capability approach in theoretical framework that sees the well-being in individual choice. And that's a like kind of built based on new liberal ideas. So if I define the benefit of girls' education through human capability approach, one possible definition could be that these girls will reach like economic independence and more individual choices, more opportunity for individual choices in the future. But my participant kind of like defined it in a different way. They saw the benefit of girls' education as a tool for the betterment of the collective society. They didn't deny that, okay, like an educated girl will have an income in the future, but they didn't see this income as something that would bring independence, economic independence for that girl, but as something that would enable this girl to be a better mother, to be a better wife, to help her family, to help the society, or even to kind of like bring khair, which is the good in this world and in the other world, for her parents. So when I asked them, okay, why do you want to serve in this SMS? And why do girls' education matter? Or what an educated girl could do? Almost all 19 participants in my study say the same thing. So these are two examples that they say. Based on Afghanistan's current situation, the main and sometimes only benefit that a girl can get from her education is to raise her children in good manners whenever she ended up living. She will help her children with their education, help with their schooling. But the fact that they can raise their children properly is a big benefit. And the other one was that the other one said that a hale mother makes a good system in the household. If the mother is not educated, the household system is not right. In every family, so many problems come and go. If the mother is hale, she straightens everything in the life of the family. And also, this wasn't that they only believed about this. They, of course, like they really believed in girls' education in this way, but this was how they they approach families and to kind of persuade them to send their daughters to school. And this was how they talked to their communities about the benefits of girls' education. So I like based on this, I myself learned three things. One was that gender equity or girls' education could be more achievable if we understand the local realities. This was something that I really sensed during my study, that one factor that this SMS was successful because they knew their communities, they knew the community's value, and actually like they shared those values with their community. They knew the vulnerable groups, they knew like the impactful or effective channels. Masjid was an effective channel, like influential or like community leaders were effective channels for them to approach. And also the other example that the other lesson that I learned was that leverage could be successful or unsuccessful. To me, the idea of having SMS in Afghanistan, the way that Ministry of Education and the World Bank and UNICEF created this institution was an incomplete story. It wasn't really successful. I do not call it successful because when they created SMS, they really did not look at the culture and tradition of jirgas. How, like most of the time, jirgas are effective, but what is that? SMS is like more than 90% of the time inactive or ineffective. And it was that because they really did not look that jirgas are usually, like they know the problem, what problem they solve. But then but here we didn't have a good communication between Ministry of Education and these SMSs to kind of make them understand that these are the issues that we're looking to solve. And also I can say that because like jirgas are usually influential members of the community, but SMS members are not really necessarily influential members of the community. This SMS that I studied, they were successful. One of the factors was that members were influential, members were really powerful in their communities. So this is why how this SMS were able to successfully leverage realities of the community, which is like more culture, tradition, culture, and religion. But SMS in general is an incomplete leverage of culture. Jirgas live there, but the SMS is not really did not learn anything from the general SMS, learn anything from the big story or big picture of Jirgas. So this I find this is a very important fact for someone, like anyone who wants to work for gender equality or for girls' education, women education, women's rights in Afghanistan or in similar societies, is that know the realities, know the tradition of the society you're working with. And then the other one kind of is not really does not stand from my first two lessons, is that this defining the benefits of girls' education as good motherhood could be a strong advocacy point. I know that there is like so many scholars that kind of argue that international development agencies should not look at women in third world or women in developing countries as tools for development. And they have really legitimate argument, and I agree with them. And then there are like this group, including myself, who strongly believe that girls' education should be valued because of the girls themselves, because of the girls' education could bring, let's say, a wider range of choices for girls, and also like this could bring economic independence for those girls, for them as individuals. But then my other argument is that even if we believe in this as an end goal, there is no harm in using girls' education as a tool for the collective society as an approach. Our end goal could be anything, but our end goal could be girls' individual choice. Our end goal could be girls' economic independence, anything. But when we work in societies like Afghanistan, our approach should be something that people believe in, that the local people believe in. And when local people, at least like 19 out of 19 participants that I had in my study, believe that girls' education, the first value of girls' education, that they will be better mothers, they will be better wives, they will be better daughters, they will serve the society. If they define it this way, so maybe that rings a bell that we could use this at least as an advocacy approach. And also, like, no matter what our approach is, at the end, like, an educated girl will have wider range of choices than an uneducated girl. So this was another thing, another lesson that I got out, and I think I'm done with the time. And thank you. So if there is any question.
Thank you so much, Sohaila. I think that was a very enlightening talk for all of us. And at this point, I would just like to remind everyone that we're going to move to the Q&A portion of the event. And so we do have some questions written out, but if you do have questions that you want to ask directly to the speaker, please feel free to raise your hand and we'll give you an opportunity to unmute your microphones. That said, I also understand that some of you might be thinking, I want to leave and I want to do other things. And if that's the case, then please, thank you for joining us. Do complete a 30-second survey we have for the program, and I'll drop it in the chat for you now. But yeah, if you do stick around, that would be great. And I'll just let the stage open for anyone who has any questions for us. And while people take a minute to think about the questions they might have, I am actually going to ask a question we received in chat. And this question asks, Sohaila, if you could change something about the SMSs, what would you change, or what would you want to do to set up a different local system that maybe even works better?
I'm not sure about like if I would change the local system, because that's not practical. But then something is the practical that I would change about SMS is that I would kind of like do like SMS has a TOR, and the TOR is like very general, and it says, okay, like these people can volunteer to be SMS members, but I would define it more specifically. And as I said, like I found out that influence of members in this SMS has a really strong impact on what they do. So I kind of would make this more specific, that as I said, like influential people, pro-education people, and let's say people with more resources, as my participants said, and also people who know the reality of their communities. I would like kind of, at least I would train the SMS leaders, all SMSs in the country, to understand these facts. So when they invite SMSs, or when they every 3 years they say, okay, like they gather with their communities that we need an SMS. So if they know this reality, if they know, okay, like these are some factors that can help my SMS be more successful, then that could have an impact. So I would train all SMS leaders, all school principals, to understand that okay, what members are kind of like know what is the volunteer work. What members know what to do for a school, all these factors, to consider these factors and then approach establishing an SMS or having an SMS for their school through these channels.
I just had a quick follow-up to what you just said about changing the SMS leadership. How much of the leadership in the current structure, how many of them were males versus females? I'm just curious.
Well, this SMS that I studied, because it was a girls' school, and the school principal was a woman, and she was the leader of the SMS. And actually, like, this was interesting that she had a very impact on the success of the SMS, because she believed that SMS could do something. So, and she had a very clear communication with SMS member, and she was one of the members that was saying that, yeah, we need an SMS, but we really cannot let anyone in the community to be volunteer, because not everyone has the asset. We need specific people with specific characteristics. So yeah, I mean, that leads to my other argument that it's not always like men in traditional societies like Afghanistan that has an impact. Many research kind of like argue that, yeah, it's men, I'm sorry for the background. Many scholars argue that gatekeepers of girls' education in societies like Afghanistan or Pakistan, men are gatekeepers, which I agree. Men are gatekeepers because in those societies, it's easier for men to reach that high level of influence in a community and have be influential. But what I found that even though for women, it's really difficult to reach at that top, and only few women can reach there. But once they reach there, there is not really a difference between like men or women. If they are able to reach that level of influence, they have the same impact.
Yeah, that reminds me of something my mother also always said. It doesn't matter if you're a leader, that's where the change can really be kickstarted. But I would love to give an opportunity to, before I move to our other written questions, I want to see if anyone has questions they would much rather ask to the speaker directly. Please feel free to raise your hand so we can unmute you. And if you would much rather just write your question in the chat, you're more than welcome to do that as well. Okay, while we get people to summon up the courage to ask a question, let me go ahead to another question that came to us previously. And in this question, the question reads, in your research, how much resistance of girls and women being educated was embedded in religion, and how much of it was a fear of the Taliban?
Well, like it wasn't that. I mean, tradition has there wasn't a fear of Taliban, as I would say, like the word, but there was a lot of fear of the insecurity and instability, and that insecurity and instability was created by the Taliban at the time. So, and then this was a thing that SMS members said that they do not want to get involved. They said, we go to their families. If they tell us that they do not let their daughters to go to school because of the religious excuses, they said that we argue like through the religion channel. If they say that if they cannot allow through because of the poverty, they said that they like we try to kind of raise funds or kind of help, but they really were not able to do a lot about the poverty. But then there was this one point that they said there is one point that we like make us silent when a parent says that they are scared for the life of their children. There was a blast this week. I'm not sending my daughter again because I don't want to get her killed. This was the point that they said we do not say anything because we are scared if tomorrow we convince them and they send children to school and something happened to their children, then like how can we respond? How can we like take that responsibility? They were saying that this is a point that they did not learn.
Yeah, I remember, I don't want the whole world to know my life story here, but I do remember when I was a little girl, my mother would also present similar concerns that it's not you, it's the society. So don't come home late after a certain time. But anyway, again, I'm gonna give people an opportunity. If you have questions, you can definitely ask them yourself. I'm going to give about 30 seconds before I move to a written question. I just want to make sure I'm not leaving anyone behind. Any questions from the audience, if you want to directly pose it to our speaker? All right, so let me move on to our next written question. Hold on, I'm losing a track. Oh, there you go. So the next question is, do you think the SMS model is more likely to be successful in bigger cities like Kabul as opposed to smaller cities and rural areas?
Well, I would say both, but the way that they are successful is different. For example, in rural areas, SMS is actually, like some other research that were done, SMS is proved to be like effective, like about the security issues, because in rural area it was easier for them to kind of know, okay, like which, like I call it like, let's say Taliban, like which Taliban group is kind of like making problem in this area. So some of these SMSs were able to go and negotiate with these specific groups, because like the community was smaller, rural, and they knew who is doing what. Negotiate and saying that, okay, let this school reopen, this girl's school reopen. So they were successful in that sense. But then in an urban area, like the one that I studied, they were not able to solve security issues because they didn't know who is doing what. The community was big. But then they had a stronger say in raising funds. Like they raised a lot of funds, and they, like, as they were saying, that the Ministry of Education just built a building and they left everything else to the SMS, and SMS is a lot. So they were successful in these ways, but then the rural areas, it could be successful in a different way. But then with advocacy, I would say both groups could be effective in the same way, because if your community is bigger or if it is smaller, it's a smaller, say a smaller rural community or a bigger urban community, still that's your community. Your approach to go and talk to them, meet with them, negotiate with them, and do your advocacy could be the same, and the impact could be the same.
And this goes back to, and I would like to stress to all of the participants here, it goes back to what you were saying towards the end of your talk, where this local community is just, that local knowledge is just so invaluable. You can't really dismiss it. So in many ways, the rural areas might end up being more successful because of those personal relationships and those local knowledge that might get lost in a bigger city.
Local knowledge, local problem, local solution. Not always, but in most parts.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we do have a few more questions, but again, I would like to open it up and invite our audience. If you do have questions at any point, please raise your hand and ask so we can unmute you. But Sohaila, the next question we have is goes back way to the beginning of your talk, where you mentioned that currently after the Taliban government took over, currently there is permission in some provinces for women to go to school.
Yes, I would believe, like, because the resources I have, actually I checked the news today. They say the different stats, but it's something between 10 to 12, and one of them just like started today.
Okay, so how, the question is, where is this permission coming from within the government? Is it a centralized government system or a more provincial level thing where there might be more negotiation room? Do you know anything about that?
Well, I mean, at this moment, I feel like those people who come to the news and kind of like, don't really know the specific things, but they. So my strong assumption, I'm kind of like, let's say, evidence-based assumption based on like the news and event that I've been following is that most of the time the provincial educational leaders or official kind of negotiate with the central government and ensure them that, yeah, like we are following your general agenda, and like, as they call it, like girls are safe to go to school and we provide a safe environment for them and everything is good. So they're open. Actually, the province that started today, one of the officials was talking that, yeah, we assure them, and now girls are going to school. And then as the central government official of the Taliban are talking that they are going to allow all provinces, allow girls to go to school, but they need to make sure the environment is safe and it's based on Sharia law. And that's also a question, because even like, I mean, under the former government, all girls, like girls and boys school were separated. So girls like gender segregated, and it was like girls were wearing like the Islamic or the hijab, and it wasn't that it was against Sharia. So I would say right now they are just like showing that they are like doing something different, but it's the same thing. They just reopen closely, like slowly.
Well, and that is what our next question is sort of related to. So I'm just going to ask anyway, because the next question is more about the curriculum and what we should expect the life of a school-going child to look like under the new regime. So what do you think will happen to the curriculum? What will happen? What are we looking forward to? Is it separation of schools, as you mentioned? Any light you could shed on that?
I mean, so far, I know that so far they haven't changed the curriculum. And even though they say that they are going to change some aspect, I would say, like, again, this is this is a guess. This is like my understanding that they may like omit or delete or like do some obvious things, but they really cannot change a lot in the curriculum because they do not have the staff for them. I mean, the Ministry of Education, like of course, the minister or like the upper level people are the Taliban members, but all other people who are working in the ministry are the people who used to work. Still, women are not allowed to go really, except for teachers. But I mean, they really do not have the expert human resource to do that. But if they do it, they really cannot do it immediately. They may do it throughout the years. But right now, they do not have the resources to do that.
Right, so we might see some changes, some additions, some subtractions sort of down the line in 5 years.
Yes, it could be things, but immediately not really much. Even they announced their constitution as the constitution of the former king of Afghanistan, who was like ruling country in like 1940s until late 1960s and in late 1970s. During those areas, they selected his constitution, and they said they are going to like kind of like reform that and adjust that to their Sharia law, but they haven't done that yet either.
Thank you for that wonderful picture that you have created for us. Before I pose you our last question, I want to again throw it out to the audience, people who are attending. If you have any questions for Dr. Isaqzai, please write it in the chat window, or if you would much rather ask it yourself, you can unmute yourself. And if not, I'm going to give you about 20 seconds. And if not, then I'm going to ask another question that we have from the chat from previously. All right, Sohaila, so I'm going to ask you this one question, which I feel like really well wraps up the objective that we have with this series of talking about ways in which gender equality can be embedded in our lives. So what can people attending tonight do after leaving this talk to support gender equality in their communities?
Well, that's a very complicated question. I could say that
I avoided asking that. I got other people to ask you that questions, but yeah, what would be your advice?
I mean, I'm not sure if it could be an advice, but this is how I approach to that, is that I see things like kind of personally. I try to kind of like judge others based on what I judge myself. Like, I know that there are many Afghan activists, educational activists, that kind of like see themselves different than, let's say, local people. But this is something I try to avoid. And I try to say, okay, like if education does these things for me, it can do like good things for them too. And then the other thing is that I really like try not to, let's say, enforce my values on their way of life. Like, of course, like, I mean, as an Afghan Muslim woman who is pro girls' education, I have many things in common with, let's say, a Afghan woman who lived in a village, but then I also have many things different, many ideas, many worldview different. But I know that education could do her the same good that it does for me. But to approach her or to approach her community to persuade them for, let's say, gender equity or gender or girls like woman education, woman rights, I use their language. I would use their approach. I see how they go towards something. I would find a way on their approach to serve my end, and which is like my end. I would say like something that, like I think or I believe is good for them. So this is how that I would say it's good to in their community, like see what's the community's realities, what's the community's approach. And then if you want to make a change, make that, as I at the beginning I said, make that to be an evolutionary and a progressive event rather than like a revolutionary that no, this is wrong, this should happen. So that's an approach that most of the time would end nowhere. So I don't know, I'm not sure if I answered the question.
No, you beautifully did, because in the field of development studies, at least that's something that was some people realize more than others, but you're absolutely right that the participation of the local community, as you said, local problems, local solutions is just so important. And if that requires us to take a step back and listen to the community, is just so much more important than sometimes showing that we have a solution. So I completely agree with what you're saying, and I'm sure all of our participants here are agreeing with what you are saying as well. But at this point, I would like to give a last call to see if anyone has any questions. And if you don't, then I thank you all for coming. If you do have questions for a speaker, you can always stay back in this chat room. If not, thank you for joining us today. And we appreciate time.
Two people are asking questions.
Oh, wonderful. I don't see them at my end. So Sohaila, if they're directly to you, do you want to answer them, please?
I mean, it's they raise their hands, so people raise their hands.
Okay. Anjali, can you help me navigate this, because I don't see anyone's hands up at my end.
I don't see them now. Raised either.
Yeah, I right now I saw two hands, but not now. Nothing now.
Okay. Maybe they were applauding you because it was a great talk. But yeah, if anyone has questions, I'll just stay quiet for maybe a few seconds and then see if they come up, if they raise their hand again. All right, it was, all right, perfect. So again, as I said, if you do have questions, please stay back and feel free to ask them to Sohaila if you want to talk to her one-on-one. But if not, then thank you. Then thank you for joining us. Flavia, who is also a professor here at FSU, mentions that she wants to congratulate you, Sohaila, for the work you've done in improving girls' education. And she also says that she has been following you since she applied for grad school. So congratulations. She's a proud professor right now.
I believe Dr. Ramos was on the committee that admitted me to FSU.
You know what? It's entirely true, isn't it? But thank you for sharing those kind words, Flavia. We really appreciate it. And as you can see with the hearts and the party poppers on the chat, many people do. But yeah, again, great shout out to you. Thank you so much for joining us, and folks who are here because you're interested in this series and you're interested in topics about gender equity and women's education. Then please know that even though this was our last talk for fall semester, we will continue the same topic with similar kinds of talks in spring 2022. So please make sure that you check out our list of speakers at cge.fsu.edu/engage-your-world. And as usual, please make sure that you take our survey so we can make our program even better for you in the future. I have put all those links in the chat window for you. And once again, thank you for joining us. I hope you all have a great evening. Bye-bye.